I thought it would be just another night photographing rich people pretending to care about charity. That's how it always starts, isn't it? You take the job. You put on the only suit you own that doesn't smell like a camera bag. You tell yourself, in, out, get paid, go home. I had no idea that by midnight, my whole life would be cracked open again, by a woman I hadn't seen in 11 years. The Langham Hotel in Boston was lit up like a jewelry box that night. Chandeliers, white orchids, a string quartet playing something that probably cost more per hour than I made in a week. 300 guests, senators, donors, a governor everyone in the room wanted something from, and me, in the corner, doing what I do best, disappearing. I raised my camera toward the stage, ready to get my first shot of the night out of the way. And that's when I saw her. Across the ballroom, in a midnight blue gown that didn't need the chandeliers to shine, was a woman I would have recognized anywhere, in a crowd of 10,000, in the dark, with my eyes closed. Madeleine. My hands stopped moving. My breath stopped moving. For 1 second, the entire room, the music, the laughter, the flashing cameras, just disappeared. 11 years ago, this woman broke my heart with 3 lines on a piece of paper. No goodbye, no explanation. Just gone. And now here she was, on the arm of the governor of Massachusetts, laughing at something he'd said, wearing a life I never imagined for her. I told myself, do your job. Take the photos, leave before she even knows you're in the room. I had no idea how wrong I was, because before that night was over, Madeleine was going to send me another note. And this time, it wouldn't be 3 lines telling me to stay away. I need to take you back. Not far, just 11 years. Because to understand why my hands were shaking over a camera in a 5-star ballroom, you have to understand who Madeleine was to me. I was 26, broke, stubborn, living in a 1-room apartment above a laundromat in Providence, shooting weddings for $50 and a sandwich, trying to build a career out of nothing. She was 24, a graduate student studying art history, the kind of woman who read poetry on the train and didn't notice, or didn't care, that every man in the car was watching her. I met her at a gallery opening. I was the hired photographer. She was the only person in the room actually looking at the paintings instead of looking at each other. "You're not photographing the art," she said, without even turning around. "You're photographing the people pretending to look at it." "The art's not going anywhere," I said. "The people might." She laughed. A real laugh, not the kind people give you when they're being polite. And that was it. That was everything. 8 months. 8 months that felt like 8 years, and also like 8 minutes, depending on which memory I let myself touch. I remember her reading me Neruda, in Spanish, that she'd taught herself from library books, just so she could read it to me in the original language. I remember the smell of fabric softener mixed with her perfume, so tangled together that to this day, walking past a laundromat can stop me cold on the sidewalk. And I remember the night she told me about her father. He was sick. The medical bills were drowning her family. And there was a man, a friend of her father's, 20 years older, a rising state senator, who had offered to help. His name was Russell Hale. I remember believing her when she said it didn't mean anything. And then, 6 weeks later, I came home to an empty apartment. Her clothes, gone. Her books, gone. And on the table, one folded note. "I'm sorry. I have to do this. Please don't look for me." 3 lines. No goodbye I could argue with. No explanation I could fight. I looked for her for a while. Then I stopped, because looking for someone who asked you not to is its own kind of humiliation, and I'd already lost enough dignity for 1 lifetime. I built a career. I moved to Boston. I dated. I told myself I was fine. And every so often, usually at weddings, photographing some other couple's first dance, I'd think. Somewhere out there, she's somebody's wife. I never imagined that face would be on a billboard on I-93. I never imagined it would be 6 feet away from me tonight, in a ballroom in Boston. For the next 2 hours, I did the only thing I know how to do when my chest feels like it's caving in. I worked. I photographed the silent auction, the string quartet, 3 senators shaking 3 sets of hands. I photographed the governor's speech. Tonight, we invest not in buildings, but in children. And yeah, the irony of that line didn't escape me, not after everything I was about to find out. And twice I caught Madeline looking at me, not staring, not obvious, just there, for half a second, before she turned back to whoever was talking to her, smooth as water closing over a stone. The second time it happened, my stomach dropped in a way it hadn't dropped in 11 years. She knows. She recognized me. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself a lot of things, standing at the edge of the bar with a club soda I never drank. And then a waiter, young guy, maybe 22, walked up to me holding a folded card. "Are you the photographer, Giuseppe?" "That's me. Someone asked me to give you this, said it was important." He handed it over and walked away before I could ask who. I didn't need to ask. I knew that handwriting. I'd know it anywhere. The same careful looping cursive that used to fill the margins of library books with translated poetry. I unfolded the card. "Meet me in the private room behind the east staircase. I need to tell you what I've kept quiet for years." I stood there for a long moment, the noise of the Gala suddenly very far away, that small piece of paper feeling heavier than it had any right to be. 11 years ago, 3 lines from this woman had taken everything from me. Now, 3 more lines were asking me to walk toward her. I thought about leaving. God, I thought about it. But I folded the card, put it in my jacket pocket, and started walking toward the east staircase. I told myself I just wanted to hear her say it to my face. That's what I told myself. The private room was small, a boardroom, dressed up for the night, with a long table and a wall of windows looking out over Boston. The Charles River was a black ribbon in the distance, the city lights blurred against the glass. Madeline was standing at the window, her back to me, the blue gown trailing slightly on the carpet. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said without turning. I wasn't sure either. She turned around, and for 1 second, just one, I saw something underneath the perfect makeup, the perfect posture, the perfect governor's wife. I saw grief that had learned over 11 years to wear very expensive clothes. "Giuseppe." My name, in her voice, did something to my chest I wasn't prepared for. "You look—" She stopped, shook her head. "You look like yourself, older. But yourself. You look like a campaign poster," I said. It came out harder than I meant it to. I didn't take it back. She didn't flinch. "I deserve that." "You don't owe me anything, Madeline. You made that pretty clear 11 years ago." I stayed near the door, hands in my pockets. Every part of me braced for whatever this was. So say whatever this is, and I'll go back to taking pictures of people who actually matter in this room. "You matter in this room," she said quietly. "You're the only reason I requested you for tonight." I blinked. "You... what?" "I saw the photographer list 2 weeks ago. I saw your name." She let out a small, almost embarrassed laugh. I told myself it had to be a different Giuseppe Marchetti. There must be more than one in Boston, right? And then you walked in tonight, and it was you, and I... She stopped, pressed her lips together, looked out the window, then back at me, like she was forcing herself. "I have rehearsed 100 speeches for if I ever saw you again," she said. "And I'm not going to say a single one of them, because they were all lies designed to make me look better than I am." I didn't say anything. I've learned in this job that silence gets people to the truth faster than questions do. I never forgot you, Madeline said. Not for one single day. Not at my wedding. Not at the inauguration. Not at 100 dinners where I smiled at men who think charm is a personality. Her eyes were shining now, but the tears didn't fall. 11 years of practice, I guess, in not letting things fall. I built a beautiful life, Giuseppe. People would kill for this life, and it has been hollow since the day I left that apartment above the laundromat. You left, I said, and my voice cracked on the word. You didn't even look at me. You wrote a note. Because if I'd looked at you, I never would have been able to do it. My father was dying, Madeline said. We were drowning in debt. Russell offered to pay for everything, and all he wanted in return was a wife, a pretty, educated, photogenic wife who would never embarrass him. I told myself it was practical. I told myself love was a luxury for people who could afford it. And was it worth it? I asked. The life you bought? No. The word landed in that room like glass breaking. It was never worth it, Giuseppe. I chose security over you, and I've spent 11 years being perfectly secure and completely empty. Tonight I saw you across that ballroom, and I thought, I cannot survive one more year of this without at least telling you the truth, even if it changes nothing. Even if you walk out of here and never speak to me again. I wanted to walk out. Some old, scarred part of me really wanted to. I stayed. You're cold, she said suddenly, looking at my hands, which I realized were clenched at my sides. You always got cold when you were trying not to feel something. You used to tuck your hands under your arms, like that night on the bridge, when it snowed in March. Don't, I said. Don't do that. Don't bring up things like you have the right to remember them fondly. I'm not trying to be fond, she said. I'm trying to prove something, because I know you don't believe me, and I don't blame you. She crossed to a small clutch on the table, opened it, and pulled out something small. Folded. Soft at the edges, the way paper gets when it's been carried for years. She held it out to me. I took it, unfolded it, and the floor tilted under me. It was a photograph, a real one, printed. 2 people on a bridge in Providence, snow falling, the woman's head thrown back laughing, the man's arms wrapped around her like he was the only thing keeping her from blowing away in the wind. It was us. It was that night. The March snow. I've carried this for 11 years, Madeline whispered, in every bag, every coat. I had it reframed twice because the edges wore through. Russell doesn't know it exists. No one knows it exists. Her voice dropped even lower. On nights I couldn't sleep, I'd take it out, just to remember I was a person once. Before I became this. She gestured faintly, at the gown, at the room, at the gala beyond the door. A photograph, Giuseppe. That's what I've had of you for 11 years. And tonight, the real you is standing 6 feet away from me, and I don't know what to do with that, except tell you the truth and let you decide what it's worth. I looked down at the photograph in my hands, 2 people who didn't know yet what was coming, who thought they had time. I kept one too, I said quietly. Madeline's breath caught. Same bridge, 5 minutes later. You weren't looking. It's in a box in my closet I haven't opened in 4 years, because every time I do, I lose a day. Giuseppe, I'm not saying this changes anything, I said quickly, because the room was tilting towards something I wasn't ready for. I'm saying, I believe you, that you meant it then. I just don't know if that's enough. There was a soft knock at the door. Mrs. Hale, the governor's asking for you. Closing remarks in 5 minutes. Madeline closed her eyes for 1 second, like someone steeling herself to dive into cold water. I have to go back out there, she whispered. I know. She took the photograph back from me and then pressed it gently into my palm again. "Keep it," she said. "I have the memory. I want you to have proof I kept it too." And then she was gone, smoothing her gown, opening the door, becoming Mrs. Madeline Hale again in 3 steps, perfectly composed, perfectly poised. I stood there, alone, holding 11 years in the palm of my hand. I watched from the back of the ballroom as Madeline slipped back into place at her husband's side, exactly 90 seconds before the lights came up for the closing remarks. I had my camera raised, habit mostly, and through the lens I watched her transform in real time. The flush in her cheeks settled. Her shoulders dropped that exact half-inch into the posture of effortless grace. By the time Russell Hale glanced over and murmured something I couldn't hear, Madeline was smiling, warm, easy, adoring, slipping her hand into the crook of his elbow like it had never left. It was the best acting I had ever seen, and it was the worst thing I had ever watched. His hand found the small of her back as the press photographers surged forward for the closing shot. Flashes went off in a wall of white light. Madeline's smile didn't waver. I lowered my camera. I couldn't take that photo. I just couldn't. And then a colder thought crept in, one I couldn't shake. What if that's all tonight was? A woman tired of her cage, looking for someone to remind her she used to be free. What if tomorrow she wakes up, looks at her life, the money, the name, the house in Beacon Hill, and decides the cage isn't so bad after all? I'd been burned by Madeline once already. I knew I could survive being burned again. I just didn't know if I wanted to find out. The room broke into applause. The crowd started filtering toward the exits, calling for cars, retrieving coats. And when I looked up one last time, Madeline was being escorted toward the lobby doors on her husband's arm, her face turned slightly away from the cameras, toward the windows, toward the dark. For 1/2 second, in the reflection of the chandeliers, our eyes met through the glass. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She just looked at me, the way she had on that bridge, 11 years ago. And then the doors swept her into a black car with government plates. Gone. I walked home, 4 miles from the Langham to my apartment in Alston in 9-degree weather, because my head was too loud for the tea. Boston at midnight in January looks like a city keeping a secret. Empty streets, steam rising from the grates, the gold dome of the State House catching the street light like something underwater. I walked past Copley Square, past the public garden, where the swan boat sat frozen and dry for the season, past a corner where 6 years ago I'd shot a wedding for a couple who, I happened to know, were now getting divorced. Everyone's pretending, I thought. This whole city is full of people standing 6 feet from someone they used to love, smiling for the cameras. I took the photograph out of my pocket twice on that walk, once at a red light on Com Ave, once outside my own building, and both times I just looked at it under the streetlight, not quite ready to unfold it all the way. Inside, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat on the edge of my bed, still in my coat, camera bag over my shoulder, and finally opened it. 2 people on a bridge, snow, laughing. I thought about the note she wrote 11 years ago. "I'm sorry. I have to do this. Please don't look for me." And the note tonight. "Meet me in the private room. I need to tell you what I've kept quiet for years." 2 notes, 11 years apart. The first one had taken everything. What was the second one asking for? I didn't sleep much. Around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text. No name. Just a number I didn't recognize. "This is Madeline. I got your number from the Gala's photography coordinator. I hope that's okay. I'm not going to ask you to forgive 11 years in one night. I'm only asking for one morning. There's a cafe on Charles Street near the river. The friendly toast. Small. Nothing fancy. No one from that world ever goes there. 10 a.m. tomorrow. No cameras, no last names. Just us. If you'll come. And if you don't, I'll understand. And I won't write again. I read it 4 times. Then I set my alarm for 8 a.m., put the phone face down on the nightstand, and lay there until the sun came up, asking myself the same question over and over. Do I protect the part of me she broke, or do I find out if there's anything left worth saving? I still didn't have an answer when my alarm went off, but at 9:40, I found myself putting on my coat anyway. The friendly toast was warm and loud and smelled like coffee and bacon. The windows were fogged from the cold outside. Mismatched chairs, string lights, a jukebox playing something from the 70s. It was, I thought as I stepped in, about as far from the Langham Ballroom as it was possible to get while still being in Boston. Madeline was already there. Back booth. And for a second, I almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the gown, the updo, the diamonds. She wore jeans and an old oatmeal-colored sweater, her hair down, slightly damp from the cold. No makeup beyond something light around her eyes. She looked younger. She looked, I realized with a jolt, like the woman in the photograph in my pocket. "You came," she said, and there was real surprise in her voice, and underneath it, something dangerously close to hope. I almost didn't. I slid into the booth across from her. "Thank you," she said, "for giving me one morning. Don't thank me yet." I wrapped my hands around the coffee a waitress had just poured. I went back and forth all night between 2 thoughts. And I want to be honest with you about both, even if they're not flattering. Okay. First thought, everything you said last night was true. You've been unhappy for 11 years, and seeing me cracked something open, and you're terrified, and you're brave, and it's real. She nodded slowly. And the second? The second is, maybe none of this is actually about me. Maybe you're just tired. Tired of the gowns, the speeches, the marriage that's really a business arrangement. And I happen to be standing in the room when you finally hit your limit. Maybe I'm not someone you love. Maybe I'm just a door out of a house you don't want to live in anymore. It cost me something to say that out loud. I watched it land on her face. Not anger, like I'd half expected. Recognition, like she'd already had this exact argument with herself at 3 a.m. "That's fair," she said softly. "That's a fair thing to wonder. And I can't prove it isn't true just by saying so. I know that. Words are cheap, especially mine, especially after the way I left." She wrapped both hands around her own mug. "Can I tell you something I've never said to anyone? Not my therapist, not my sister. No one. Go ahead. 2 years ago, Russell and I went to Italy, a state trip, dressed up as a vacation. We were in Florence. There's a bridge there, the Ponte Vecchio, and I stood on it at sunset, surrounded by everything beautiful, everything I was supposed to want. And all I could think about was a different bridge, a cold one, in Providence, with a person who isn't my husband." Her voice wavered. "I cried in the bathroom of a 5-star hotel in Florence, Giuseppe, because I missed a man I'd left 8 years earlier, in a city I never go back to. That's not exhaustion. Exhaustion doesn't have your face." We sat with that for a moment, plates clattering around us, the jukebox switching songs. I turned my coffee cup in a slow circle on the table, watching the liquid tilt. "Can I ask you something?" I said finally. "And I need you to actually think before you answer. Don't just say what you think I want to hear." "Okay. If Russell Hale weren't governor, if there were no money, no campaign, no house in Beacon Hill, no photographers chasing your car, if he were just a man you married for security, and that security had cost you nothing, and you were comfortable and safe And bored? I made myself say it slowly. Would you still be sitting across from me right now? Or is part of this just being tired of the cage? And I'm the nearest open window? Madeline didn't answer right away. I'd half expected an instant wounded denial. Instead, she looked down into her coffee for a long moment. When she looked up, her eyes were wet, but steady. I've asked myself that, she admitted, more than once since last night. And the honest answer is, I don't know how to separate them. The cage and you. Because the reason the cage feels unbearable is you. It's knowing there was another life, smaller, poorer, realer, that I could have had. And I chose marble floors instead. She wiped quickly at her eyes. So if you're asking whether I'd be sitting here if my life were already happy, maybe not. Maybe I'd never have found the courage to find out what I lost. But Giuseppe, the unhappiness isn't new. It's 11 years old. You just walked back into the room where it's been living the whole time. I exhaled slowly. It wasn't the answer I'd braced for. Too easy. Of course it's only you. I never stopped loving you. And it wasn't the answer I'd feared either. A flat I just want out. And you're convenient. It was messier than both. And truer for being messy. That's a better answer than I expected, I said. Is it good enough? I don't know yet. I looked her in the eye. I'm not trying to be cruel, Madeleine. I just got hurt by you in a way that took years to recover from. I'm 37 now, not 26. I can't afford to spend years recovering from you again. So if we do this, whatever this is, I need it to be real. Not a rebellion. Not a midlife crisis with my face on it. Real. I understand, she said. I'm not asking you to trust me yet. I'm asking you not to close the door yet. That's all. One morning at a time. I nodded slowly. And that was, of course, the exact moment the diner door swung open. A blast of cold air. A man in a heavy coat. A phone raised. A small white flash. Gone before I even registered it. Madeline had gone completely pale. That wasn't a coincidence, she said quietly. Nothing involving me is ever a coincidence anymore. Someone followed me here. By 6 that evening, it was online. A grainy photo. Madeline Hale, the governor's wife, no makeup, hair down, leaning across a diner table toward an unidentified man. The headline was vague and devastating. Gov. Hale's wife spotted in intimate diner, meeting with mystery man. Sources say they were clearly not strangers. By 8, 3 more outlets had it. By 9, my phone, which almost no one calls, rang. A clipped voice from the governor's communications office, asking if I had any comment regarding photographs taken this morning. I said nothing. I hung up. I sat in my dark apartment, that photo glowing on my laptop screen. In the grainy still, I looked exactly like what the caption implied. The internet had already decided what story this was. My phone buzzed. Madeline. I'm so sorry. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Russell's furious. Not hurt. Furious, which tells you everything about what this marriage actually is. His team's calling an emergency meeting tomorrow morning. I won't let them drag your name through anything if I can help it. I typed back. Are you okay? A long pause. No, but not for the reason you'd think. I'm not upset we got caught. I'm upset because for about 4 hours this afternoon, before this happened, I felt like myself for the first time in 11 years. And now I'm back to being managed. A press strategy. An asset that needs containing. I read that twice. And something in me, something that had been braced, defensive, half waiting for this whole thing to collapse so I could say I told you so and walk away with my guard intact. Something in me shifted. Because the woman writing those texts didn't sound like someone looking for an escape hatch. She sounded like someone watching the door close again, and hating it. I typed, "Don't apologize for this. You didn't take that photo. Someone else decided my face was a story." I paused, then added, "What happens now is the real test, Madeleine. Not last night. Not this morning. Now, when it's not private anymore, and it's not easy, and your husband's team is in a room deciding how to make this disappear. That's when I find out if you meant what you said." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. "Then come to the house tomorrow afternoon," she wrote finally. "Not a cafe. Not somewhere hidden. The actual house, Giuseppe. I want you there when I tell Russell the truth. All of it. I'm done being managed." The Hale residence sat on a quiet street in Beacon Hill. Red brick, black shutters, gas lamps, the kind of house that looked like it had never once raised its voice. I stood across the street for nearly 10 minutes before I made myself cross. A staffer, clearly briefed, clearly unhappy about it, led me to a study at the back of the house. Dark wood, law books that looked unread, and standing by the cold fireplace, Governor Russell Hale. Up close, without the stagecraft, he looked older. 62 going on 70. The easy public smile nowhere in sight. He looked like a man doing math. "So," he said, not extending a hand, "you're the photographer? Giuseppe Marchetti. I know who you are. My team ran a background check this morning. Providence, 11 years ago. I know you and my wife have history." His voice was flat, clinical. "What I don't understand is why she insisted you come here, today, instead of letting this die quietly, like everything else dies quietly." "Because I asked him to," Madeleine said from the doorway. She came in wearing simple clothes again, no performance left in her posture at all. She crossed the room and stood, deliberately, beside me, not beside her husband. Russell's eyes tracked the movement like he already knew what it meant. "Russell," she said, "I'm not going to pretend the photo was nothing. It wasn't. Giuseppe and I were together, years ago, before you and I married. And I never stopped loving him. I told him so 2 nights ago, at the Gala. I asked to meet him yesterday, because I needed to know if there was anything left worth saving." She took a breath. "There is." The room went very still. "Do you have any idea," Russell said slowly, "what this could do? Not to me. To you, the foundation, the women's shelters. 11 years of what, Russell?" Madeleine's voice didn't rise, but something in it sharpened. 11 years of being extremely good at this. I built that, and I'm not throwing it away. I'm telling you the truth. Because you and I both know this marriage stopped being a marriage years ago. Separate floors, separate calendars. We attend the same events and sleep in different rooms and call it discretion. I'm not asking your permission to feel something. I'm telling you, I'm done pretending I don't." Russell looked at me for a long moment, not with the fury I'd braced for, something closer to exhaustion. "You understand," he said quietly. "Whatever you think this is, the press is going to make it ugly. Affair. Scandal. They won't care about 11-year-old history. They'll care about the story that sells." "I know," Madeleine said, "and I'll deal with that, but I'd rather deal with an ugly true story than a beautiful false one for 1 more year." She turned to me. For the first time since I'd walked in, something close to fear crossed her face. Not of Russell. Of me. Of what I might say next. "I'm not asking you to fix this," she said. "I'm not asking you for anything. I just needed you to hear me say it, with him standing right there. So you'd know it wasn't only for you. It's for me, too." We left separately. Madeleine stayed behind to finish what I imagine was a very long, very cold conversation with her husband, and soon after, with a team of lawyers. I walked back into the city alone, the wind cutting through Beacon Hill, and I didn't feel triumphant. I felt, if anything, more careful than before. Because here's the thing about watching someone detonate their entire life right in front of you. It's enormous. The kind of thing that, once said out loud, in a room with witnesses, can't be quietly walked back. And I couldn't shake the colder thought underneath it. What if this is just momentum? What if she did this because it was the bravest thing she'd ever done? And bravery feels like love. And in a month, when the cameras and lawyers and headlines are unbearable, she looks at me and realizes the bravery is gone, and so is the feeling. I didn't say any of that to her that night. She texted, exhausted. The conversation with Russell had gone about as badly as expected. There'd be a statement. Her lawyer was involved. She was staying at her sister's place in Cambridge. I just replied, "Get some sleep. We'll talk when you can." But 3 days later, she showed up at my studio in Alston. No warning, just a knock at 9 at night, looking like she hadn't slept since the gala. I knew I had to say the thing I'd been holding. "You look terrible," I said, which wasn't fair, but it was true. And she laughed despite herself. "I feel terrible. It's been the worst 3 days of my adult life, and somehow also the most honest." She sat down heavily on the old couch in the corner. The same kind of couch, I realized with a jolt, I'd had in the apartment above the laundromat 11 years ago. Russell's filing for divorce, quietly for now. There'll be a statement next week, something about differences and mutual respect. "Okay," I said. "Okay? That's it?" "No," I said. "That's not it." I pulled a chair over, sat down across from her, close enough our knees almost touched. "Madeleine, I need to say something, and I need you to actually hear it. Not just agree because you're exhausted and it's easier. All right. I am not your rebound from a marriage you hated. I am not the proof that your old life was real. I'm not a place to land because everything else collapsed. I need to be a place you choose, separate from the collapse. Do you understand the difference? Because right now, everything in your life just fell apart. And I happen to be the one constant in the wreckage. And that is a very easy thing to mistake for love." Madeleine was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached into her coat pocket. I half braced for another folded photograph. Instead, she handed me a single sheet of paper, folded in thirds. It was an apartment listing. Small. 1 bedroom. Jamaica Plain. Nothing like Beacon Hill. At the bottom, in her handwriting. Viewing scheduled for Thursday. Signing the lease with my own money. The inheritance from my father. The only money in 11 years that was ever really mine. "I started looking 3 days ago," Madeleine said quietly. "Before I knew what you were going to say tonight. Before I knew if you'd even want this. I'm not doing this for you, Giuseppe. I'm doing it despite everything telling me not to. Because for the first time in 11 years, I want a life that's mine, whether or not you're in it. I'd just very much like you to be." There were no grand speeches after that, and I noticed, in the weeks that followed, that was exactly the point. Madeleine didn't announce her transformation. No interviews about finding herself. No leaning into the scandal for sympathy. She just, quietly, methodically, started dismantling a life that had never really been hers. She signed the lease in Jamaica Plain, 800 square feet, 3rd floor. No elevator. A radiator that clanked at night. She gave away most of the gowns to a charity that resold them for shelter funding, keeping only the midnight blue one, which she folded into a box without a word. And she took a job, not a ceremonial board seat, an actual job, part-time, at a small non-profit running after-school art programs in Roxbury. The kind of work she'd studied for in grad school and never once been allowed to do. Because a governor's wife doesn't have a job, she has causes. I watched all of it from a careful distance at first, close enough to see it, far enough not to be the reason for it. Then, on a Tuesday, 3 weeks in, she showed up at my studio again. Paint under her fingernails, having spent the afternoon helping 8-year-olds make papier-mâché masks. "You've got paint on your face," I said. "I know. I didn't have time to." She stopped, looked at her hands, laughed. A real laugh, unguarded. Nothing like the practiced warmth from the gala. I forgot to check a mirror before I left. 11 years, and I never once forgot to check a mirror. Now I forget on purpose, I think. I reached up and wiped a smear of blue paint from her cheekbone with my thumb. My hand lingered there, just slightly longer than it needed to. "You know what's strange," I said quietly. "I keep waiting for the part where you miss it. The house, the driver, all of it." "I do miss some of it," she admitted. "I miss not worrying about money, honestly. Jamaica plane rent is more than I expected, and freelance translation doesn't pay what people think." She reached up, covered my hand with hers, still resting against her cheek. "But Giuseppe, I have never, not once, in 3 weeks missed being her. The smile, the performance. I thought giving it up would feel like falling. It feels like putting down something heavy I'd been carrying so long, I forgot it had weight." Spring came to Boston the way it always does, reluctantly, in fits and starts. The Charles shedding its ice in uneven gray patches, the public garden waking up at the edges. It was Madeline's idea, of course it was, to go back to Providence. "I haven't been back," she said on the drive down. "Not once in 11 years. I used to think I never wanted to see it again. Now, I think I never let myself, because I knew exactly what it would do to me." The laundromat was still there, older, the sign more faded, but still there, the hum of the dryer still audible through the glass, and the bridge from the photograph, was exactly as we'd left it. Except it wasn't snowing, it wasn't March, and we weren't 26 and 24 anymore. We stood at the railing, looking down at the water, the way we had 11 years ago, except this time, there was no urgency in it. No countdown neither of us had known we were on. "I used to come here, in my head," Madeleine said. "Whenever Russell's team would brief me before an event, smile here, don't engage on this topic, defer to the governor on that. I'd go somewhere else in my mind. This bridge, this exact spot." She turned to look at me. "I want to ask you something, and I want you to take as long as you need. There's no event tonight. No cameras. No clock. Ask. If I asked you to try this, really try, not see where it goes, not one morning at a time, would you want that? Knowing everything you know now? Knowing I'm not a governor's wife anymore? I'm a woman with a 1-bedroom in JP, a part-time non-profit salary, and a lot of therapy bills?" I looked out at the water for a long moment. Then I reached into my coat, the same coat I'd worn the night of the gala 3 months ago now, and took out the photograph she'd given me. I'd carried it every single day since. "I've been thinking about something," I said. "That night, in the private room, you said you'd carried this photo for 11 years because it was proof you were a person once, before you became everything else. And I think, for 11 years, I carried my version of it for the opposite reason. Not to remember who I was, to remember what I'd lost, to keep the door closed." I looked up at her. "I don't want to carry it as a closed door anymore, Madeleine. I want it to be the first photo in a new box, not the only one." We didn't get married right away. That came later, quietly, the following spring, in a small ceremony in the public garden, maybe 20 people, none of them politicians. But that evening, on the bridge in Providence, with the late light turning the river gold, I said the thing it had taken me 11 years, and 1 gala, and 1 diner photo, and 1 cold study in Beacon Hill, and one apartment in Jamaica Plain to be ready to say. I'm not going to pretend the last 11 years didn't happen, I told her. I'm not going to pretend I'm not. Somewhere, still the guy who found a note instead of a goodbye. That guy doesn't disappear just because we're standing here. But I think, for the first time since that night, I'd rather be afraid with you than safe without you. Madeline's eyes filled, but she didn't look away this time, didn't perform composure for anyone. I'm not asking you to be my plan B, I said, and you're not mine. I think we're each other's second first chance, different people than we were, doing it slower, doing it for real. What does doing it look like? She asked, half laughing, half crying. Practically, I mean. I have a one-bedroom and a part-time job and a divorce that's still finalizing. You have a studio with a leaky radiator and 3 years of back invoices. It looks, I said, like two broke people in their late 30s, figuring it out as they go. No gowns, no gala, no note slipped to a waiter. I took her hand, properly, fingers laced through mine, the way I hadn't done in 11 years. Just Giuseppe and Madeleine, no last names required. No last names, she repeated softly. And for the first time since the night of the gala, she smiled. Not the practiced warmth from the ballroom, not the careful poise from the cameras. The real one, the one from the photograph, the one that started everything, 11 years ago, on a different bridge, in a different march. Just us, she said. This time, I stay. Behind us, the lights of Providence began to come on, one by one, as the sun went down over a city that, like the one we'd left, an hour north, had a long memory, and had finally, after 11 years, let two people walk back across the same bridge they'd once been forced apart on. Boston doesn't forget. Neither did we. And for the first time, that wasn't a wound. It was the whole point.